On August 13, 1983, Starkey Swenson left his home on bicycle and set off into the Neenah, Wisconsin night. His planned destination and route are unknown. What is known, he was never heard from again. 10 years later, with no trace of Swenson's body ever found, a man was arrested and charged with Swenson's murder. He maintains his innocence, but halts his 1994 trial by accepting a lesser charge and is sentenced to 2 years in prison. To this day, that man, John C. Andrews, refuses to admit any involvement or guilt in the crime. Starkey Swenson's body has never been found. I'm Dr. Jordan Karsten, and together with my team, I've been asked by investigators to help find the body, and with it, answers. In this podcast, we'll review the case in detail, applying today's knowledge and technology, and chronicle the effort to locate and recover the lost body of Starkey Swenson. This is Cold Case Frozen Tundra, Episode 4, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hello and welcome again to Cold Case Frozen Tundra. I'm your co-host, Matt Hiskus. On March 15, 1994, Stephen Glynn, a defense attorney from Milwaukee, stands in a courthouse in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and tells a Winnebago County jury that John C. Andrews, his client, did not murder Starkey Swenson. Local media have been captivated by the recent revitalization of the Starkey Swenson case. The major breaks in that case were detailed in the first 3 episodes, and if you haven't listened to those yet, we recommend that you do that now. Swenson went missing after leaving his home on bicycle around 8:30 p.m. on August 13, 1983, and for 10 years, investigators had no credible leads as to what happened to him. All of that changed when Suzanne Eggert, a former girlfriend of John Andrews, detailed to police in 1993 that Swenson was part of a love triangle with John Andrews and his former wife Claire Andrews, and that she witnessed a confrontation between John and Starkey at the Shattuck Junior High School that resulted in Andrews killing Swenson with his car. A pretrial hearing in 1993 resulted in a Winnebago County judge ruling that there was enough evidence to proceed to a full trial with John Andrews charged with first-degree murder. However, Andrews' defense lawyers still believed that the case against him was weak. In their opening statement, they highlight for the jury that with regards to the charge of murder, there was, quote, not one bit of scientific evidence that supports this claim, end quote. They also point out that the testimony of Suzanne Eggert, the prosecution's star witness, was not consistent, saying that Eggert, quote, never told the same story about this case in the 18 separate times she talked about it, end quote.
So as expected, the prosecution's opening statement sought to dismiss the defense's argument. In terms of there being no scientific evidence, Joseph Paulus, the Winnebago County District Attorney, explained that it should be expected since it was well established that John Andrews had intensively cleaned his car on the day after Swenson's disappearance. Similarly, Paulus said that the slight discrepancies in Eggert's testimony were trivial, since broken bicycle parts had been found by the janitor in the grassy alcove at Shattuck Junior High, essentially independently corroborating her account that Andrews ran Swenson over with his car at that location on the school's grounds. The prosecution even used their opening statement to claim that Andrews had left Neenah immediately after killing Swenson to travel to a bar in Omro, Wisconsin, about 20 miles away, in an effort to establish an alibi.
Following the opening statements, One of the first aspects of the trial was a ruling by the judge to allow the jurors to be taken to Shattuck Junior High to view the crime scene in person. Interestingly, this move was objected to by the prosecution, who argued that the scene had changed in a decade and wouldn't truly reflect what the area was like in 1983. The defense dismissed this argument, stating that, in 1994, the area was actually better lit than it was at the time of the alleged crime.
Okay, just to recap a little, Suzanne Eggert's story to the police in pretrial testimony describes the murder of Starkey Swenson as taking place in a grassy alcove at Shattuck Junior High in Neenah. Initially, Eggert says she was sitting in her car with the windows down at the intersection of Elm and Division, a few doors down from the home of Claire Andrews, when she hears a verbal confrontation between two men taking place in the grassy alcove. She can't see the men at the time, but she can see the taillights of a vehicle aglow in the alcove. According to Eggert, she recognizes one of the two voices as John Andrews, which she said she was able to do partly because of Andrews' unique British accent. As the argument between the two men continues, Eggert listens in. She hears a man pleading with Andrews, saying, "No, John, don't," 2 different times. The second time, Suzanne reports that the man adds, "I'll stay away from her," or possibly, "I'll stay away from Claire." Eventually, Eggert hears a male scream that she says sounds cut off, as if stopped at its peak. And this was followed by metal scraping on the pavement and 2 loud thumps on a car, and eventually a sound like wood breaking. After all of that, Eggert says that she hears a voice, the one that she identified as John Andrews, saying, "There, now you're dead. How do you like that?"
Eggert told the police that after hearing all of that, she drives away from the altercation down Elm Street, pulling around the corner of the school onto Loudon Boulevard, and she parks there. It's not clear whether she sees more of the scene while she's parked there on Loudon Boulevard, or if she's viewing it while driving back past the school as she leaves, as she's had some conflicted reports of her testimony. But we do know that Eggert tells police and later the court that she sees John Andrews' blue Pontiac Firebird parked at the junior high, that it's in the school's driveway, which is right near the alcove. She also says she sees John leaning into the open trunk of his car.
So obviously, for the jury to evaluate this pivotal testimony, they're going to need to see firsthand the layout of Shattuck Junior High and its surrounding neighborhood.
Right. And you can see why the judge ruled that it was permissible. So that makes me question why the prosecution wouldn't want the jury to see the location. You would think that in a case that relies on purely circumstantial evidence, the context of Eggert's observations would need to support their claims.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most interesting aspect of the description of the scene is the fact that when Eggert says she saw Andrews leaning into the trunk of his car in the alcove while she was sitting at the corner of Elm and Loudon, she was about 1,000 feet away from where that car would have been. To be honest, for me, trying to mentally determine how far away that is pretty difficult.
Yeah, I agree. Probably the best thing we can do now to try to assess this case is go visit the scene ourselves.